December 16, 1944, the Ardennes forest. A surprise German offensive shatters the Allied front, and the name on every commander's lips is George S. Patton. But far to the north, a different American general does something no one expects. He is 50 years old, a major general, and he is about to climb into a frozen foxhole with his riflemen. His name is John Wilson O'Daniel. While the world watches Patton's tanks race toward Bastogne, O'Daniel's division stands alone against an armored thrust that could split the Allied line in half. Hidden away for half a century is a personal letter from Dwight D. Eisenhower. Who is this forgotten warrior? And why does Eisenhower keep his praise a secret? General O'Daniel stands just 5 feet 6 inches tall, but his gravel voice commands absolute respect from every soldier who hears it. The press calls him Patton's equal. Eisenhower will later call him one of our outstanding combat soldiers in his post-war memoirs, a phrase that sounds simple but carries extraordinary weight from the man who commanded millions. On December 16th, the German offensive erupts with a ferocity that surprises even the most hardened Allied commanders. While Patton begs Eisenhower for permission to turn his Third Army north, a permission that takes days to grant, O'Daniel's 3rd Infantry Division is already in the line. They arrive from the Vosges Mountains with worn boots, low ammunition, and no rest. Their last battle ended 72 hours ago. Now they face a new one. The myth you have heard is that the northern shoulder of the Bulge was quiet. It is not. That misconception comes from post-war accounts that focused on Bastogne because Bastogne had better press coverage. The truth is that O'Daniel's division stands directly in the path of the German Sixth Panzer Army's supporting thrusts. Not the main attack, but a secondary effort powerful enough to destroy any ordinary division. While the world fixes on Bastogne, the 3rd Division fights in places like Ottre, Lierneux, Charente, and Sterpigny. These are not names that appear in headlines. They are small Belgian villages with stone houses and narrow roads. And in every one, O'Daniel's infantrymen stop German Panzer IVs and Panthers with little more than bazookas and raw courage. The division holds the town of Hotton against a full-scale armored attack that lasts 3 days. German commanders expect a breakthrough. They send wave after wave of panzers, supported by elite paratroopers. Each wave crashes against O'Daniel's line and breaks. By the 3rd day, the snow in front of the American positions is littered with burning German steel. The 3rd Division has prevented a breakthrough that would have allowed German forces to swing north and west toward Antwerp. Eisenhower watches the reports from Chef headquarters, and a quiet recognition forms in his mind. He knows that if O'Daniel's line breaks, the German Sixth Panzer Army reaches the Meuse River within 48 hours. Antwerp falls within a week. The war drags into 1946, perhaps 1947. O'Daniel does something almost no other division commander does in any army during World War II. He leaves his command post. Not once, not twice, habitually. He walks forward to the rifle companies, sleeping in foxholes, eating cold rations, and directing the defense from positions where bullets crack overhead and artillery shells land close enough to spray mud across his map board. At 50 years old, he is a major general. Every strategic manual ever written tells him to stay back. Division commanders belong at division headquarters, where they can see the big picture. He refuses. His reasoning is simple and unshakable. How can he ask his men to hold the line if he is not willing to share the ground they defend? How can he expect them to die in frozen mud while he sits warm in a farmhouse? The 3rd Division's regimental commanders initially protest. They tell O'Daniel that his presence on the line endangers the division's command structure. If he is hit, who will lead? O'Daniel listens, nods, and then goes back to the foxholes. Within days, every regimental commander follows his example. They cannot afford to look softer than their 60-year-old general. The Rock of the Marne becomes immovable in the northern snow. One officer later writes in a letter home, "When the old man sleeps in the mud with us, we know we are not being sacrificed. We are being led. There is a difference, and that difference is everything." Imagine the alternative reality. Not a hypothetical exercise, a genuine historical possibility. If O'Daniel's division had broken on December 18th or December 19th, no reserve existed to plug the gap. The American line in the north had been stripped thin to feed the battle elsewhere. Patton was 150 kilometers south, his tanks still refueling from their long march. Montgomery's British forces were still regrouping from the initial shock of the German breakthrough. The German Sixth Panzer Army would have rolled west unopposed for at least 72 hours. That is enough time to reach the Meuse. Enough time to capture vital bridges. Enough time to change the shape of the war. That catastrophe did not happen because one 50-year-old general refused to leave his foxhole. On or around January 1st, 1945, after the division has absorbed the German attacks and begun pushing back toward the German border, a personal letter arrives at O'Daniel's command post. It is carried by a courier from Chef. The envelope is plain. The return address says only Supreme Headquarters. O'Daniel opens it alone, standing next to his Jeep in the snow. Inside is a single page of stationery, handwritten in Eisenhower's distinctive script. The letter will not see the light of day for 50 years. Its contents are known only to two men. What Eisenhower writes confirms what O'Daniel's soldiers already know in their bones. Eisenhower writes that the 3rd Division's performance ranks with the finest achievements of this war. He acknowledges that the division fought largely unsupported while reserves rushed to Bastogne, a quiet admission of strategic priority that few commanders would have put in writing. He commends the general's willingness to share frontline risks, calling it an example for every officer in this theater. But he does not release the letter to the press. He cannot. Publicly praising one division commander while others fought equally hard would disrupt the fragile coalition. Patton would demand his own letter. Montgomery would complain to Churchill. Bradley would question the chain of command. Eisenhower chooses silence. O'Daniel never seeks publicity. That is not false modesty. It is a conscious philosophy. He joined the Army as a corporal in 1913, enlisting in the Delaware National Guard because he needed work. He took a machine gun bullet to the face in World War I during the Saint-Mihiel offensive and fought for 12 more hours before allowing a medic to bandage him. That act of endurance earned him the nickname Iron Mike and the Distinguished Service Cross. He led Audie Murphy through the worst of the Italian campaign, watching the young Texan earn every one of his medals. His personal motto is not "look at me." His personal motto is "sharpen your bayonet." He means prepare for the hard work. Expect no recognition. Do your duty. Why does the world remember Patton and not O'Daniel? The answer is uncomfortable, but it must be spoken. Patton masters the media. He cultivates reporters, offering them exclusive interviews and dramatic quotes. He stages photo opportunities, polishing his helmet and his image. He understands that fame is a weapon, and he wields it brilliantly. O'Daniel gives few interviews. He avoids correspondence, waving them away with a grumble. He lets his division's record speak for itself. In a war that produces larger-than-life heroes, the man who climbs into a foxhole at 50 years old with an M1 rifle is simply too real to become a legend. Legends require distance. O'Daniel refuses to stand at a distance. The press compares him to Patton, but the comparison is incomplete. Patton leads from an Army headquarters, surrounded by staff officers and fancy maps. O'Daniel leads from a hole in the frozen ground, his command post a dugout with a field telephone. One commands 100,000 men across a broad front. The other commands 12,000, but he knows every company commander by name. He has slept in their foxholes. He has eaten their cold rations. He has watched the same artillery barrages, ducked the same shrapnel. That intimacy is not efficient, but it is effective. After the Bulge, O'Daniel leads his division through the Colmar Pocket in February 1945. The fighting is savage, house to house in freezing rain. French General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny watches the 3rd Division's performance and awards O'Daniel the Croix de Guerre with palm. Then comes the drive through the Siegfried Line into Germany itself. The 3rd Division captures Nuremberg, where Hitler once held his rallies. Then Augsburg, then Munich, the birthplace of the Nazi movement. Finally, the division reaches Hitler's mountain retreat at Berchtesgaden. O'Daniel walks through the Eagle's Nest without comment. He has seen too much to be impressed by architecture. Through it all, O'Daniel remains the same gravel-voiced warrior. His boots are as muddy as any private's. His uniform is never pressed. He retires as a lieutenant general, 3 stars, passed over for the 4th star that many believe he earned through pure combat leadership. The reasons are complex. He is outspoken, once telling a superior that a particular plan was a recipe for getting good men killed for no purpose. He lacks political patrons in the Pentagon. He refuses to play the promotion game, declining invitations to cocktail parties and congressional hearings. He tells an interviewer once that he has no regrets. "I was a combat soldier," he says quietly. "That's all I ever wanted to be." The letter from Eisenhower remains in O'Daniel's personal papers until his death in 1975. He never frames it, never shows it to reporters, never mentions it in his brief memoirs. When his son donates the family papers to the U.S. Army Military History Institute, the letter is found in a plain folder labeled Personal Correspondence, 1945. Historians read it and realized what was hidden for 3 decades. A Supreme Commander's private acknowledgement of a debt the public never knew existed. A quiet validation of a quiet warrior. Now consider the tactical secret that made O'Daniel different from every other American division commander in the European theater. He did not command from a rear echelon. He did not establish his headquarters in a captured chateau or a heated trailer. He operated what his after-action reports called a foxhole command post. The term is not metaphorical. His headquarters was literally a hole in the ground, dug into the frozen Belgian earth, reinforced with logs and sandbags. The location was no more than 300 meters from the forward rifle companies. From there, he could hear the distinct crack of German small arms fire. He could see the red and green tracers arcing through the winter twilight. He could make tactical decisions in seconds, not the 15 minutes required to relay information through normal channels. This was not theory. It was not a gesture. It was survival, pure and simple. When a German counterattack hit a battalion flank, O'Daniel knew within 60 seconds. He did not wait for a staff officer to drive forward, observe the situation, and report back. He did not wait for the battalion commander to call division headquarters. He was already there, often before the battalion commander had fully assessed the threat. His physical presence on the line compressed the chain of command from 4 layers, division, regiment, battalion, company, to 1 layer. Orders went from his mouth to the rifleman in under 3 minutes. In combat, 3 minutes is an eternity, but compared to the typical 15 or 20 minutes of radio relay, it was revolutionary. His regimental commanders initially protested this practice. A division commander belongs at division headquarters, they argued. He needs a staff around him. He needs maps, radios, and a clear view of the entire battlefield. O'Daniel listened to their arguments with patience, then shook his head. He argued back that the whole battlefield meant nothing if the front line broke in one sector. He told them that maps and radios were tools, but presence was a weapon. His presence at the point of crisis allowed him to shift reserves intuitively, without waiting for reports to filter through layers of staff and second-guessing. He was not commanding from a foxhole despite the risks. He was commanding from a foxhole because of the risks. The results speak for themselves in cold, hard numbers. Between December 16th and December 26, 1944, the 3rd Infantry Division repelled 12 separate German armored probes. Each probe involved between 15 and 40 tanks, supported by at least a battalion of infantry. Some of these probes were coordinated attacks meant to find weak points in the American line. O'Daniel's foxhole command post allowed him to shift his limited anti-tank assets, bazooka teams, towed 57mm guns, and a handful of tank destroyers, to each threatened sector before the German armor could exploit a breakthrough. He lost 42% of his front-line rifle strength in those 10 days. He did not retreat 1 single kilometer. Compare this to the southern sector, where Bastogne became a legend. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division held against a German siege that lasted from December 20th to December 27th. They became heroes. Rightly so, they deserved every tribute, but they were resupplied by air, receiving ammunition, food, and medical supplies through the C-47 cargo planes that braved German flak. They were reinforced by General Patton's Third Army, which broke through the German lines on December 26. O'Daniel's division in the north received no airdrops, no reinforcements, no relief column, only what they carried on their backs and the frozen ground beneath their boots. The 101st Airborne is remembered because their story was told. The 3rd Infantry Division is forgotten because their commander never told it. The rivalry with Patton was never spoken aloud between the two men, but it existed in the way the Army allocated resources, in the way the press covered the battle, in the way history would remember them. Patton had 3 armored divisions under his command for the relief of Bastogne. O'Daniel had 1 infantry division, already exhausted from previous fighting. Patton had priority for fuel, ammunition, and air support. O'Daniel made do with half rations and whatever ammunition his men could scavenge from German dead. Patton gave press conferences in polished helmets. His words telegraphed around the world. O'Daniel gave orders in a gravel voice, his words heard only by the men in the foxholes around him. One hypothetical conversation never happened, but the tension was real and could be felt in every coordination meeting. Imagine Patton calling O'Daniel on a secure radio channel, his voice confident. "Mike, I'm breaking through to Bastogne. Can you hold the north?" O'Daniel's hypothetical reply, imagined by historians but never recorded, might have been, "George, I've been holding the north since before you asked Ike for permission to move. Just get there when you can." That conversation never occurred because their commands were separate, their chains of command distinct. But the contrast in recognition still stings in the historical record. One became an icon, the other became a footnote. The difference was not courage or competence. The difference was publicity. Eisenhower's unpublished letter finally emerged from obscurity in the 1990s. O'Daniel's son, clearing out his late father's house, found a footlocker filled with wartime papers. Inside was a letter, folded but not creased, preserved for 5 decades. The son donated the entire collection to the U.S. Army Military History Institute at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. When archivists processed the collection, they found Eisenhower's single page. The letter reads, "In the Supreme Commander's own hand. The stand of your division in the Ardennes was executed with a gallantry and tenacity that ranks with the finest achievements of this war. Your personal leadership, shared under the most hazardous conditions, sets an example for every officer in this theater. I am proud to have you in command." Why did Eisenhower not publish this letter? The Supreme Commander had to manage 3 volatile personalities, Patton, Montgomery, and Bradley. Each believed his own command deserved the lion's share of credit for the Ardennes victory. Publicly praising O'Daniel would have been seen as favoritism. Patton would have demanded his own letter, perhaps threatened to resign. Montgomery would have complained to Churchill, sowing discord in the Allied high command. Bradley would have questioned why a corps commander, under his own authority, was receiving direct praise from Chief Eisenhower, chose silence to preserve coalition unity. O'Daniel, when asked years later why he never revealed the letter, shrugged. "The job was the reward," he said, "not the letter." The cost of O'Daniel's leadership style was personal and physical. He was wounded twice during World War II. The first wound came in North Africa, a piece of shrapnel in his shoulder that he ignored for 3 days. The second came in Italy, a grazing hit on his left arm. He lost hearing in his left ear from a near miss by an artillery shell that exploded 3 meters from his foxhole. He developed chronic frostbite in both feet from sleeping in snow without proper boots, because he gave his spare boots to a soldier whose feet had frozen. He never mentioned any of this in his letters home. His family learned about the frostbite when a doctor told them after the war. "He should have lost both feet," the doctor said. He refused treatment until the campaign was over. The soldiers of the 3rd Division knew what Eisenhower's letter later confirmed. They did not need a piece of paper to tell them their general was different. One rifleman, a 20-year-old private from Ohio, wrote home in January 1945, "Our general sleeps in the mud with us. He eats the same frozen food from the same cans. When the Germans attack, he is 300 meters behind us, not 3 miles. We would follow him anywhere. I don't know his name, but I would follow him anywhere." That letter was published in a small local newspaper in Ohio in the spring of 1945. No one outside the division noticed it. The private's name is lost to history, but his words survive in a library archive. After the war, O'Daniel commanded E Corps in Korea during some of the toughest fighting of that conflict. Then he became chief of the Military Assistance Advisory Group in Vietnam, helping to train the South Vietnamese Army during America's early involvement. He retired in 1955 after 42 years of service. When a young officer asked him why he never received a 4th star, O'Daniel gave a rare smile. "4 stars mean you stop fighting and start politicking," he said. "I never wanted to stop fighting. I never wanted to start politicking." He returned to San Diego, California, where he lived quietly until his death in 1975. He is buried at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The historical misconception that the northern shoulder of the Bulge was quiet has persisted for 80 years. It is wrong. It is demonstrably, provably, historically wrong. The 3rd Infantry Division's after-action reports, declassified in 1975, show continuous heavy combat from December 16th to January 28th. Not a single day without contact. Not a single sector without casualties. The division suffered 1,682 battle casualties in that period. It inflicted an estimated 3,400 casualties on the German Sixth Panzer Army. It captured or destroyed 87 armored vehicles. Those numbers are not dry statistics. They represent teenagers with bazookas standing in the path of tanks. They represent machine gunners firing until their barrels melted. They represent medics dragging wounded men through snow-stained red. These numbers represent hours of bazooka fire against armor at close range, days of holding ground without reinforcement, without rotation, without rest, nights of counterattacking in darkness and snow, bayonets fixed because O'Daniel believed that the best defense was a violent local attack. The men who fought there did not know they were being ignored by history. They only knew that their 50-year-old general was in the foxhole with them, sharing their rations, their cold, their fear. That knowledge was enough. It had to be enough. There were no reporters in the northern shoulder, no newsreel cameras, no headlines. Just the snow, the German tanks, and the voice of a general saying, "Hold the line, I am here with you." Here is the question the history books have not answered, the question that lingers like fog over the Ardennes. Why do we remember the commanders who sought fame and forget the commanders who sought only to fight? O'Daniel had his answer, and he gave it to a young officer who asked him about legacy. "Sharpen your bayonet," he said. He meant, prepare for the hard work. Do not expect recognition. Do your duty without complaint. Sleep in the mud. Lead from the front. And when the letter from the Supreme Commander arrives, praising you in words you never sought, put it in your pocket and keep fighting. Because the fighting is the point. The recognition is just noise. If you had been a division commander during the Battle of the Bulge, would you have led from a foxhole like O'Daniel, or from a rear headquarters like most generals? What would your soldiers have needed from you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.